The small cargo ship floated silently above the blue and green planet. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead and tightened a bolt on the engine. He was alone as usual and liked it that way. The hum of the ship and the soft glow of the control panels were the only sounds he needed. He had come to this remote world for supplies, not trouble, but trouble had a way of finding him anyway. Below, a small alien village sat between the cliffs and the river. Houses made of soft, glowing materials shivered as the wind blew. Strange plants with bright red leaves swayed gently, hiding the villagers inside. Most of them were small, with large eyes and delicate limbs. Marcus had learned to watch from a distance. Humans were often feared here, but he had no intention of causing harm. Suddenly the sky lit with fire. Explosions shook the cliffs. Marcus froze. From above he could see a group of armored ships swooping down toward the village. The mercenaries had come for loot as usual. Panic spread. Alien screams echoed across the valley. Villagers ran from their homes, carrying whatever they could hold. A little alien girl stumbled forward, her golden hair glowing faintly in the sunlight. She looked no bigger than Marcus's shoulder and clutched her mother's arm. They ran together, but her mother tripped on a stone. The girl's eyes widened with terror. She looked around and spotted Marcus standing near his ship. Her small voice rang out, loud and angry. "You hurt my mom," she yelled. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He had not touched anyone, but the girl was scared. He slowly stepped forward, keeping his hands open and visible. He bent down on one knee, trying to appear smaller, less threatening. "I am not your enemy," he said in the simplest words he could find. The girl hesitated, her large eyes filled with confusion. Around them the other villagers froze. Humans were often strong and dangerous, and they rarely helped. This human was different. Marcus moved slowly, showing his palms again empty and safe. His movements were careful, deliberate. He knelt closer, keeping his voice low. "I can help. I promise. No harm." The girl looked at her mother lying on the ground. Blood stained the soft fabric of her clothes and her small body shook. Marcus's heart clenched. He reached out his hands again, but not too fast. The girl flinched but did not run. There was something in his eyes that spoke of calm, of truth, of patience. Marcus touched the ground beside her mother, gently placing his hands under her back. She was injured but alive. Carefully, he lifted her without sudden movements. The girl watched, wide-eyed, as Marcus carried her mother with steady strength. The mother groaned softly but did not resist. Marcus's careful hands made sure she was not hurt more. The mercenaries landed nearby, their armored suits gleaming. They expected humans to run or fight, but Marcus did neither. He stayed in front of the girl and her mother, blocking any threat with his own body. The villagers behind him whispered in fear and amazement. One of the older aliens shook its head slowly, murmuring, "He is human, but he protects." Lyra, the small girl, took a cautious step closer. Her hands brushed against Marcus's arm, just enough to feel he was real and not a threat. Marcus looked down at her, speaking softly. "I will not hurt her. I will not hurt you." The mercenaries fired once, the blast shaking the ground near Marcus's feet. Dust and rocks flew into the air, but he did not flinch. His eyes stayed on the girl, on her mother. Slowly the girl's fear began to fade. She could see that the human before her was not part of the chaos. He did not raise a weapon. He did not shout. He only carried her mother with care. Around them the village began to stir. Other aliens peeked from behind their homes. They had lived under human fear stories for decades, but Marcus acted differently. He moved with respect, with thought. He was not fast, but he was steady. The little girl's voice broke the silence again, softer this time. You won't hurt us?" she whispered. Marcus shook his head gently. "Never. I only help." The sound of explosions faded as the mercenaries moved on, searching for easier targets. Marcus kept the girl and her mother close to him. He lowered her mother to the ground slowly, checking her injuries. She had a deep cut on her arm and a twisted leg, but she could still breathe. That was enough for now. The little girl sat beside her mother, still trembling. She looked up at Marcus, curiosity mixing with fear. Slowly she reached out her hand, touching his arm lightly. Marcus smiled, showing his empty palms again. The gesture was small, but it meant trust. Around them, the village began to breathe again. Other villagers peeked from hiding, unsure but hopeful. Marcus stayed kneeling, not moving suddenly, waiting for the girl to decide. She finally nodded slightly, understanding that this human could be trusted at least for now. Marcus helped the mother sit upright. The little girl held her hand tightly, but did not pull away from Marcus. He looked around at the other villagers, then at the burning sky above. The danger was not over, but for the first time, there was a chance that humans and aliens could see each other differently. The little girl's voice broke the silence one last time. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus only nodded. Words were not needed. His actions had said more than any words could. The sky still burned with smoke and fire, but for a small moment there was hope. A human had knelt, shown his hands and protected what mattered. And in that small act, a bridge between two very different species had begun. Marcus stood slowly, ready to face whatever came next. The little girl ran to her mother, holding her close. Marcus's eyes swept the village, and for the first time in a long time, he felt that being human could mean more than survival. It could mean protection, it could mean trust, it could mean hope. And in the eyes of a small alien girl, Marcus saw a future where humans were not feared, but understood. Marcus carefully helped the little alien girl's mother to a soft patch of ground under a large tree. The leaves above glowed faintly, casting a warm, gentle light over the clearing. The mother groaned as Marcus adjusted her leg, trying not to hurt her more. The girl Lyra stayed close, her small hand barely touching his arm. She watched every movement, her eyes wide and alert. "I will help," Marcus said softly, keeping his voice calm. He unrolled a cloth from his bag and began cleaning the mother's cut. The alien skin was soft but fragile. Marcus worked slowly, wiping away the dirt and blood without rushing. Lyra flinched a few times but did not pull back. She was curious, but she was also still scared. "Safe," Marcus whispered, showing his empty hands again. Lyra's lips pressed together as she considered his words. She had never met a human who did not fight first, who did not shout, who did not demand payment. Marcus moved with patience and care. Every gentle motion told her that he meant what he said. Other villagers began to peek from behind their homes. They were small and cautious, but they could not ignore what they saw. A human, someone they had always been taught to fear, was helping, not hurting. Some whispered to each other. "He is different," one said. Another nodded slowly. "He saves, he does not destroy." Marcus wrapped the cut with the cloth and tied it gently. He checked the mother's breathing. She was weak but alive. That was all that mattered for now. He then moved carefully to support her leg, adjusting it so it would not hurt. Lyra's hands hovered over her mother, but she did not stop him. She could feel the care in his movements. The little girl finally spoke, her voice small but steady. Why are you helping?" Marcus looked at her and smiled softly. "Because it is right," he said. "No one should be hurt when I can help." Lyra studied him for a long moment. The truth in his voice was clear. She had never heard a human speak with such honesty. Slowly she stepped closer, helping her mother sit upright. Marcus held the mother carefully, supporting her weight as she adjusted. The villagers began to step out of hiding, curious but wary. The sky above still had smoke from the attack. In the distance, the sound of the mercenary ships faded. Marcus did not relax. Danger could return at any moment. But in the clearing, a small bubble of calm existed. He treated the injured mother as if she were his own. His actions spoke louder than words. Lyra watched as Marcus took a small container of water from his bag and offered it to her mother. The mother sipped slowly. Lyra's eyes filled with a mix of relief and surprise. Humans were strong, yes, but she had never seen one show such gentleness. The villagers began to talk quietly among themselves. "Perhaps humans are not all the same," one said. "Perhaps some can be trusted." Another nodded. "He does not fight for greed or power. He only cares." Marcus looked at the girl and her mother. "You can trust me," he said again. "I will not leave until you are safe." Lyra's small hand touched his arm again, a tentative sign of acceptance. She could feel that he meant what he said. Hours passed and Marcus stayed by their side. He used simple gestures and words to explain what he was doing. He showed Lyra how to help her mother carefully. He cleaned wounds, adjusted clothing, and even made a small bandage for the girl herself. Lyra watched and learned, her fears slowly turning into trust. A few of the older villagers came closer, curious and cautious. Marcus did not flinch at their presence. He only smiled and gestured for them to stay back if they wanted. He did not demand their trust. He let his actions earn it. Some nodded slowly, understanding that this human's courage was not in weapons but in care. As evening came, the clearing glowed with a soft light from the alien plants. Marcus helped the mother sit against a tree and wrapped a blanket around her. Lyra stayed close, holding her mother's hand. Marcus knelt beside them, showing his empty palms again. The gesture had become familiar, a sign of honesty and safety. For the first time, Lyra spoke without fear. "Thank you," she said softly. Marcus nodded. He did not need to reply with words. His work, his patience, and his care had already spoken. The village slowly began to feel hope again. The story of a human who helped, rather than harmed, spread quietly. Marcus's actions were simple, but they carried a powerful message. Humans could be more than fighters. They could be protectors, healers, and friends. The night came, but Marcus stayed by the mother and child. He made sure they were comfortable, showing them the small acts of care humans sometimes overlooked: warmth, attention, and safety. The little girl finally rested her head against her mother, still watching Marcus with trust in her eyes. Outside, the stars shone over the village. The humans' reputation of violence and fear had not changed overnight, but in that clearing, it had begun to shift. A small alien girl had learned that humans could be kind. The villagers had learned that strength could come with compassion. And Marcus, kneeling under the glowing tree, knew that trust was built through action, not words. The next morning, the village would see him differently. They would remember the human who had arrived quietly, who had not fought or shouted, who had only helped. Lyra would tell her friends about the human who showed his hands and protected her mother. And somewhere in the stars, Marcus would continue his journey, knowing that one act of care could change hearts, one village at a time. In the quiet of the night, under alien lights, Marcus watched over the mother and child. The battle had passed, but the real work had begun. Earning trust, building hope, and showing that humanity could shine in ways the galaxy had never expected. The sun rose slowly over the village, casting soft light on the glowing plants and small homes. Marcus stayed beside Lyra and her mother, who were now resting against the trunk of the large tree. The night had been quiet, but Marcus knew danger could return at any moment. He had learned long ago that trust was fragile, and even the smallest mistake could undo it. Lyra's mother stirred and opened her eyes. She looked at Marcus with confusion at first, then slowly with understanding. She did not speak the human language, but her gaze told Marcus everything he needed to know. She was alive because he had chosen to help. Lyra climbed onto her mother's lap, holding her close. Her small hands still brushed against Marcus's arms as if seeking reassurance. The distant hum of engines made Marcus tense. The mercenaries were not done. They had attacked for profit and would not leave easily. He stood slowly, brushing dirt from his clothes, and scanned the horizon. The humans' reputation as fighters was known across the stars, but Marcus had learned that mercy could sometimes be stronger than weapons. Suddenly, the mercenaries appeared at the edge of the clearing. They had tracked the humans, expecting an easy fight or an escape. Their armored suits gleamed in the sunlight, and weapons glinted threateningly. Marcus did not panic. He stepped in front of Lyra and her mother, showing his empty hands again. His calm stance was different from what the mercenaries expected. "Move," one of the mercenaries shouted, their voice harsh. "You cannot protect them all." Marcus shook his head slowly. He did not argue. He only positioned himself to shield the mother and child. The mercenaries fired, and blasts scattered dirt and small stones around them. Marcus dropped to one knee, holding his hands open and keeping his body between the villagers and the attack. He moved with careful precision, not out of fear but to protect. Lyra watched, her small body trembling. But something had changed. She had seen Marcus help her mother without hesitation. She had seen him care. She realized that he was not like other humans the stories had told her about. He did not fight for money, for fear, or for power. He fought for others, for life itself. Some villagers began to move closer, inspired by what they saw. They had lived with humans as symbols of danger, but this one acted differently. Slowly they joined Marcus, forming a line of defense, not with weapons but by standing together. Their courage grew because Marcus had shown that humans could choose mercy. The mercenaries hesitated. They had expected the villagers to panic and run. They had expected Marcus to flee or attack. But he had done neither. He protected the weak, stayed calm under fire, and acted with purpose. The small aliens realized that this human strength was not in destruction but in protection. Lyra stepped forward. Her voice, small but firm, rang out across the clearing. "Stop. You will not hurt us." The mercenaries paused, surprised. The girl's courage seemed to grow from the human beside her. Marcus did not speak. He simply nodded, acknowledging her bravery, and continued to shield her mother. A soft whistle came from the trees, drawing the mercenaries' attention. Marcus took the chance. Using his quick thinking, he led the mother and child behind a low rock wall, giving them extra cover. He moved smoothly, without panic, showing the villagers that humans could be clever as well as strong. The mercenaries fired again, but this time Marcus anticipated their moves. He guided the villagers to safety, teaching them with small gestures where to crouch and when to move. The aliens began to see humans differently. They had thought all humans were dangerous, but Marcus was proving them wrong step by step. Lyra's mother finally whispered a word in her own language and Lyra repeated it. Marcus did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Gratitude, trust, recognition. They had seen the human's heart through his actions. The mercenaries, frustrated by their failure, finally retreated. Their engines roared and disappeared over the horizon. The villagers stared after them, a mixture of awe and disbelief on their faces. Marcus lowered himself to his knees again, showing his hands as always. No weapon, no threat, only care. Lyra ran to him, small arms wrapping around his leg. Marcus smiled, gently placing his hand on her head. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "You saved us," she said softly. Marcus shook his head. "We saved each other," he replied simply. "I only helped when I could." The villagers began to emerge fully from their hiding places. They moved slowly at first, unsure if the human could be trusted. Then one by one they came closer. Their large eyes studied Marcus's face, saw the calm in his stance, and realized he had not acted for power or fear. He had acted for them. An older alien stepped forward. You are human?" he asked, voice trembling. Marcus nodded. "Yes, I am human. I help because it is right." The villagers murmured among themselves. Stories they had heard about humans were often about war, greed, or cruelty. But here, one human had shown something different. He had fought not with weapons but with courage, patience, and care. Lyra stood beside her mother, holding her hand. She looked at Marcus with respect and gratitude. You are not like them," she said softly. Marcus smiled gently. "I am human, but I choose to be kind." For the first time, the villagers began to see humans not as invaders or threats, but as potential allies. The little girl had helped them understand that courage and strength could exist with mercy and care. Marcus had changed their view in a single day, not with words but through action. The sky above turned a soft orange as the sun climbed higher. Marcus stayed kneeling beside Lyra and her mother, showing his hands and keeping a calm presence. The villagers gathered slowly, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. They had learned something new. Humans could be protectors, and sometimes, a single human could change how an entire village saw the galaxy. Lyra smiled for the first time that day. She ran to Marcus and took his hand gently. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus only nodded. Actions had spoken louder than words. He had shown mercy when it mattered. He had acted with care. And in that moment, every alien there realized that humans were more than their stories. They were capable of hope, courage, and trust. The clearing fell quiet, but the feeling lingered. Marcus had done more than save lives. He had changed hearts. Lyra held her mother close, watching Marcus with new eyes. The villagers whispered, still in awe. The moment of realization had come. Humans could be heroes not through fear or power, but through compassion and courage. The village was quiet now, but it was no longer filled with fear. The mercenaries had gone, leaving only the soft hum of the alien plants and the gentle murmur of the river nearby. Marcus stayed with Lyra and her mother, sitting on the ground and watching over them. Even though the danger had passed, he knew that trust was something that needed time to grow. Lyra helped her mother sit more comfortably against the tree. The mother's leg was still sore and her arm had a deep cut, but she was recovering. Lyra's small hands moved carefully, brushing leaves from her mother's clothing, learning to help without hurting. Marcus watched her and nodded approvingly. He had learned long ago that teaching through action was the fastest way to earn trust. "You are different," Lyra whispered to him. Her voice was small but filled with curiosity. Marcus looked at her, keeping his hands open and calm. "I do what I can," he replied. "I help because it is right." The little girl's eyes widened. She had seen many humans in stories, all cruel or careless. This one had shown her that humans could be gentle, patient, and brave at the same time. She reached out, touching his hand lightly. Marcus did not move. He let her feel that his hands were safe. Other villagers began to emerge from hiding. At first they stayed at the edges, watching. Some were still cautious, but others were curious. They had seen what Marcus had done. He had carried the mother to safety, protected them from the mercenaries, and healed wounds without asking for anything. That was unlike anything they had expected from a human. One of the older villagers stepped forward. "You are human," he said slowly, almost in disbelief. "Why do you care for us?" Marcus smiled gently. "Because I can. Because it is right to help." The villagers murmured among themselves. For generations, humans had been feared as dangerous and unpredictable. But this one human had shown them another side. He had shown them courage mixed with care. Lyra's mother looked at Marcus and nodded faintly, understanding more in that silent gesture than words could say. Marcus spent the next hours helping rebuild small damages caused by the attack. He lifted fallen debris, fixed broken containers, and helped strengthen fragile walls with simple tools. Lyra and some other children watched him closely, imitating his movements. They were learning from his actions, seeing that humans could be strong but still careful and gentle. The bond between Marcus and the little girl grew as they worked together. She began to trust him completely. She no longer flinched at his hands or stayed behind her mother. Instead, she ran beside him, carrying small items and passing them to him when needed. Each smile she gave him felt like a small victory. At one point, a small animal, a creature like a fox with glowing fur, scampered near the group. Marcus held out his hand and the creature paused. Lyra laughed softly as it came closer. "It trusts you," she said. Marcus nodded, keeping his movements calm and slow. The little moments like this were important. Trust built slowly and every small act mattered. The villagers started sharing small tasks with Marcus. They showed him where the village stored food and water. He helped them organize it in a way that would make future attacks easier to survive. Lyra followed every step, learning from both Marcus and her mother. Together, they began to feel a sense of safety that had been lost during the attack. As the day passed, Marcus noticed how the villagers were starting to change. Their movements became less cautious. Their eyes were no longer full of fear when they looked at him. Instead, there was respect. There was hope. And most importantly, there was the understanding that humans could be more than the stories had ever said. When evening came, Marcus helped the mother and child settle under a glowing tree. He adjusted their blankets and made sure their wounds were secure. Lyra sat beside her mother, leaning against her. She looked at Marcus and smiled for the first time that day. "You are my friend," she whispered. Marcus smiled softly. "And you are mine," he replied. The villagers gathered nearby, watching quietly. They did not interrupt. They had learned to respect the human who had chosen to protect, not fight, to heal, not harm. One of the older aliens came closer and bowed slightly. It was a gesture of trust, of recognition, and Marcus returned it with a nod. That night, the clearing glowed softly under the alien stars. Marcus stayed awake, keeping watch. Lyra and her mother slept soundly, their breathing even. He thought about how fragile trust could be, and how easy it was to destroy, but how strong it became when it was nurtured. Humans had the power to fight, yes, but Marcus had shown that the greater power was to protect and to care. The bonds he had built with Lyra and her mother were not just temporary. They were growing into something stronger, something that could not be broken by fear or violence. Each small act of kindness, each gesture of care, had created trust that ran deeper than words. Lyra stirred in her sleep and murmured softly, turning toward Marcus instinctively. He rested a hand gently near her, careful not to touch unless needed, but letting her feel his presence. She felt safe. Her mother felt safe. And for the first time, the villagers felt that humans could be allies, not threats. Marcus looked at the sky above. The stars were bright and the village below was quiet. He thought about how one human could make a difference, not through weapons or fear, but through patience, courage, and compassion. The galaxy often judged humans by their power alone, but here in this small clearing the truth was clear. Humans could be protectors, healers, and friends. Morning would come and with it more work. But the bond Marcus had formed with Lyra and her mother, and the trust he had earned from the villagers, would last. They would remember his actions, not his words. They would remember the human who had knelt, who had shown his hands, and who had chosen to care. The village slept peacefully, knowing that a human had come and shown them that hope could exist even in the darkest times. Marcus stayed awake a little longer, watching the glowing plants, the sleeping mother, and the little girl. He smiled softly, understanding that some bonds, once made, could never be broken. And in the quiet of the alien night, a small girl whispered in her sleep, "You are safe, because of him." Marcus simply nodded, knowing that trust, once earned, was the most powerful thing in the galaxy. The sun rose over the alien village, bathing the glowing plants in soft golden light. Marcus stood at the edge of the clearing, looking down at Lyra and her mother. They were awake now, stretching and preparing for the day. The mother's leg had healed enough to walk slowly, and the cut on her arm was bandaged neatly. Lyra ran toward Marcus, her small feet barely making a sound on the soft ground. "Good morning," she said, smiling brightly. Marcus crouched down, showing his hands as always, empty and safe. "Good morning," he replied simply. The villagers had begun to gather again, curious and cautious, Yet there was a new respect in their eyes. For the first time, humans were not just strangers or threats. They were something different, protectors who could act with courage and care. The older alien who had spoken to Marcus the day before stepped forward. "We have watched," he said. "You do not fight for power. You fight for life. That is rare." Marcus nodded. "I do what I can," he said. "I help when I can. That is what humans do." The villagers murmured among themselves. Some looked at each other with surprise. Some looked at Marcus with wonder. The stories they had grown up with about humans had been of fear, greed, and destruction. But Marcus had shown them another side, a side where strength came with compassion, where courage was used to protect, not to harm. Lyra ran to her mother and back to Marcus. "Will you stay?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. Marcus shook his head gently. "I must continue my journey," he said. "But I will never forget you." The little girl's eyes widened. She had grown attached to him, and so had the villagers. But she could see the truth in his words. Humans traveled the stars, and sometimes they could not stay. What mattered was what they left behind, the example of their actions. Marcus spent the next hours helping the villagers prepare for the future. He showed them how to reinforce their homes against attacks, how to carry water safely, and how to heal minor injuries quickly. He used simple words, gestures, and demonstrations. Lyra watched every move, learning quickly. The villagers began to realize that humans could teach more than survival. They could teach hope, trust, and clever ways to protect life. When the preparations were complete, Marcus knelt once more beside the mother and child. Lyra touched his hand lightly, and her mother smiled at him. "Thank you," she said in her language. Marcus only nodded. Actions, not words, had done all the speaking. As he walked toward his ship, the villagers followed him a short distance. They did not fear him. They had seen his courage and care firsthand. They had seen a human act not out of greed or anger but out of kindness. And in that moment the galaxy seemed a little smaller, a little kinder because of what one human had done. Lyra ran to the edge of the clearing and waved. "Goodbye," she called. Marcus waved back. "Goodbye," he replied. "Be safe." The villagers returned to their homes, but the memory of Marcus remained. They would tell their friends and families about the human who had saved them, about the courage that came with mercy, about the strength that came with care. Slowly, stories would spread beyond the village, reaching neighboring settlements. In the distance, other humans in their ships traveled the stars, unaware of the impact one of their own had made. But Marcus knew. He had seen the change in the villagers' eyes, felt the shift in their hearts. Humans were feared for their power, but here, in this quiet corner of the galaxy, humans were beginning to be understood for their compassion. As Marcus climbed into his ship, he looked back one last time. Lyra stood with her mother at the edge of the clearing, her small hand raised in farewell. He saw the trust in her eyes, and he knew that humans could be more than conquerors. They could be allies, protectors, and teachers. The engines of his ship hummed to life. Marcus glanced at the stars above. There were billions of worlds, each with its own challenges, each with its own beings to understand. Humans had the ability to fight, yes, but they also had the ability to inspire, to teach, and to protect. That was the true lesson of his journey. The ship lifted from the ground, carrying Marcus toward new worlds. Below, the alien village began its day, safer and stronger than before. The villagers had learned something that would change their future. Humans were not only dangerous, they could also be a force for good, a beacon of hope in the vast galaxy. Lyra waved again, her small hand glowing in the morning light. Marcus smiled and waved back, feeling a quiet pride. The galaxy was full of unknown dangers and challenges, but he had shown that humans could be trusted, that their actions could speak louder than fear, and that even a single human could make a difference that others would remember for generations. As the stars stretched ahead of him, Marcus thought of the village and the little girl. He knew that the galaxy would judge humans for many things, but he had left behind proof that humans were capable of hope, compassion, and courage. That proof would travel farther than any story, reaching worlds that might never have seen humans in such a way before. Lyra returned to her mother, and together they began to rebuild their lives. The villagers worked with them, inspired by the example of the human who had arrived quietly, fought only when necessary, and healed without asking for reward. Marcus's lesson had reached them. Humans could choose to be protectors, even in a galaxy filled with conflict. High above, Marcus's ship disappeared among the stars, leaving the village in peace. And in the hearts of Lyra, her mother, and the villagers, a new understanding took root, a lesson that would not be forgotten, that humans could be brave, kind, and trustworthy, and that one human's courage and care could change the way the galaxy looked at an entire species. The clearing fell silent, but the memory remained. A small alien girl had learned the meaning of trust, a mother had seen the power of mercy, and a village had discovered that humans could be heroes not only through strength but through compassion. Marcus's journey continued, but his lesson echoed across the stars. The galaxy could learn from humans and perhaps one day see them not as threats but as guardians of life and hope.